Talks are really starting to heat up surrounding the Los Angeles Lakers in their pursuit of their next center. As we've heard about multiple centers, including Daniel Tice, JaVale McGee, but this one player no one's talking about and could change everything for the Los Angeles Lakers going forward. So, write down exactly who that is and discuss some new reports that have dropped surrounding him. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, if you're part of the 90% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Lakers content. We're approaching 15,000 subscribers. If you want to help us towards that goal and you're enjoying the multiple videos a day, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And thank you guys again for your continued support as we continue to cover everything Lakers for you all. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to go over today. Now, obviously, we've been discussing the Los Angeles Lakers center pursuits, whether that be guys like JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard, everybody. The Lakers are involved in a lot of different players. However, this one player has arose in some talks surrounding Lakers fans, but also from an Athletic article. And it is a very interesting player. And it is somebody who's not in the NBA, but is currently in the NBL and is an extremely interesting fit for the Los Angeles Lakers. And that player is, of course, someone that you maybe not everybody heard about is Will Magnay. So you can see this here. If Rob Pelinka and the Los Angeles Lakers are serious about the international big man market, then Will Magnay should be at the top of their list. Before he got hurt, he was looking like a defensive player of the year candidate in the Australian NBL. He's a 6'10" big, can pick and roll, can pick and pop, plays super hard as well. And I recommend you guys go and have a look at some of his gameplay and some of his footage there in the NBL. He is an extremely interesting player. Now, we covered a European center who was 7'3" in Eddie Tavares in yesterday's video, and this guy is a very similar in some ways, but also different in a lot. Of course, he's several inches shorter, but is a lot more athletic. And there's some advanced stuff here from watching. As you can see here, one of the best rim protectors in the NBL. He puts pressure on a lot of the other bigs in the paint. He has an okay three ball, so yes, he can stretch the floor. You won't necessarily want him to shoot threes anyway if he's playing with Luka. Wonder how they'd pull it off with his contract, though. And obviously, the thing is, with the Lakers right now, they don't have a ton of money to give out. They're above the first apron, so any signing, whether it be in the buyout market or, of course, the international free agency market, if you want to call it that, it's going to be interesting to find a way to pull it off. When you're talking about Will Magnay, he is an interesting player. And here's the big thing with the Lakers. You're talking about some of the other targets that they have available, whether that be, we've heard, like I mentioned earlier, Dwight Howard, let's say JaVale McGee, Daniel Tice. Those are the most likely guys, with a lot of fans thinking JaVale McGee is the most likely at this point. As you compare him to a guy like Will Magnay, who plays, again, in the Australian NBL, he did go down with an injury. But before that injury, if you look at some of his film, and I had a quick look at it, he was an extremely versatile defender. And not versatile in the sense of being able to guard 1 through 5. When it comes to playing pick and roll defense, of course, going 1-to-1 with a lot of the big men, he's tall enough to be able to go up against some of the really tall big men, both in the NBL and assuming in the NBA as well. And he can stretch the floor a little bit, which is something that's always nice, even though you probably won't have to stretch the floor as much when you have Luka Doncic on the floor, simply because, of course, they're going to get everybody else open, the elite shooters. And Jovan Buha gave an interesting kind of insight here, and there's also another report within this article. But this kind of gives some context surrounding what their pursuit is right now following the Mark Williams trade being canceled by the Lakers. You can see this here. The situation is wild. I've covered a lot of stories as a Lakers beat reporter, but never something like this. They were ecstatic. They landed Williams. They felt like he was a notable upgrade over Jackson Hayes. Now they're left with Hayes, who has been solid lately filling in for Davis, but is a backup, and a couple of two-way centers in a conference loaded with good big men. They could and probably will sign a buyout or free agent center, but the options are underwhelming. They'd have to waive a current player and eat the money, and those types of players rarely make a difference in the playoffs. What is your immediate reaction to the fallout of this deal? I know you had some reservations about the trade. Any silver lining? He's talking about, of course, asking another reporter. And basically, if you read the whole article, there is a note regarding Will Magnay in the actual article, which is a little bit surprising. Now, Will Magnay is, again, we'll dive into his stats and things in a minute here, but he says here, the final place to look is in the international market. I don't have expertise on the European marketplace in terms of players who have contractual outs in their deals mid-season. However, the Australians' NBL's regular season just ended this past weekend, making several players potentially available. The best is Tasmanian center Will Magnay, who has an NBA out clause and has garnered interest from NBA teams. The backup center on the Australian national team, he is a bit undersized and has dealt with injury issues, but when he's on the court, he's tremendously impactful. And this gives some very important context because obviously we're not all very privy to the information surrounding, contractual outs. And of course, if you're in the NBA, you had to have, or in the NBL, sorry, you had to have a contractual out clause to get out, and he does. So he has an NBA out clause surrounding his contract there in the NBL. And this is actually very important because A, the season just ended, so there's not overlap at this juncture regarding the rest of the season. He is in game shape. He's been playing a lot, and of course, he has recovered from his injury, and hopefully that wouldn't be a big problem going forward, whether that's with, of course, the Lakers or any other team. but it's at the point now where if you're able to look at the other centers available in the buyout market, everybody wants, Dwight Howard, players like that who aren't playing basketball at this moment. Of course, some players are overseas. Of course, Daniel Tice and the buyout market as well. But when it comes to the buyout market in the NBA right now, there isn't a lot of players available that would be extremely impactful. I mean, the most notable one, like I keep mentioning, is Daniel Tice, but he's a little bit undersized. And there is a case to be made that if you want to get somebody who's extremely skilled, then Will Magnay would be the best option. Again, he's a fantastic defender. And when you're looking at a player to complement Jackson Hayes, what you're kind of looking for is someone who can play solid defense and can be a little bit bigger. Now, he's not 7'3" like Eddie Tavares was, who I covered in yesterday's video. However, he is extremely good defensively when healthy, and he is more impactful than a lot of the buyout guys that are available. Or, I mean, even like Alex Len. Like, I'd probably rather take a flyer on Will Magnay compared to Alex Len, because you know what you're getting with Alex Len. He obviously got his contract with the Pacers. He backed out of that, and there's a good chance he ends up with the Lakers. He's a big body, and at least with Alex Len, you're going to get some sort of NBA production. But with Will Magnay, the upside is a lot higher, and at a point now where the rest of the West is loaded with stacked centers, it's going to be interesting to see. And if you're unfamiliar with him, let's dive into his stats a little bit here. So I played for Tasmania in the NBL, and in 13 games this season, he averaged 25 minutes a game, putting up 13 points, 1.6 blocks, and 7 rebounds. And compared to Eddie Tavares' stats, this is, of course, a lot better. And again, it's NBL stats. How will it translate to the NBA? He has very minimal NBA experience, played with the Pelicans for a little bit there, but 13 points a game, right? And that the NBL is not necessarily, it's not comparable to the NBA, but it's still a very solid league, especially in Australia. And he is a very efficient, player. He doesn't shoot a lot of threes, but in 0.6 attempts a game, he shoots 37.5%. Like, he can occasionally shoot one, but he's not going to be a stretch big by any stretch of the imagination. And we're putting up 14 points and 7 rebounds coming off a very solid season. Again, he is a very good paint defender. You can see there on the left, he's had seasons where he averaged over 2 blocks a game back in 2019, 2020. Now, obviously, this is several years later, still putting up 1.6 blocks a game. It just makes a lot of sense. And as you look at the Los Angeles Lakers depth chart here, you have Luka, Reaves, Rui, LeBron, and Jackson Hayes. And we saw yesterday, I mean, the first 2 points of the game were scored by Jackson Hayes, or LeBron lobbed to Jackson Hayes, and then Luka's first assist and first stat in the Lakers uniform was a lob to Jackson Hayes. And we know that Luka Doncic is doing things behind the scenes with Jackson Hayes, working on their chemistry, doing all these different things. If you can slot a guy like Will Magnay as the backup center, I think it would give you a lot more value than a guy like Trey Jemison, and probably than a lot of the buyout candidates, simply because of his upside in the NBL and his actual defensive versatility. And you have, again, here, you can see this article, like I mentioned earlier, he is tremendously impactful when he's on the court. The issue is dealing with injuries and all these different things, but there are NBA teams who are interested, and the Lakers are included in that. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. You can see this here. He was clearly on his way to an all-NBL season before his injury. And if I were the Lakers, I would probably sign Magnay to a team-friendly deal and see what happens. He's an awesome teammate to have around the locker room. Should be fresh from having sat out the last 6 weeks of action. My recommendation for the Lakers would be to cut Christian Wood, Markieff Morris, and sign Magnay and Bamba, unless a bigger name surprisingly gets cut loose. It's probably not enough to solve the issue. I mean, there's a lot of different moving parts here. I would say Christian Wood's going to get cut. You could also make an argument for Cam Reddish, but Markieff Morris, it seems like they want to keep him around as a veteran guy, almost like in the Udonis Haslem role, albeit in a very less, tenured guy. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Let me know down below, would you like to see Will Magnay in a Lakers uniform? And what other players would you like to see the Lakers get? Thank you guys for watching. See you later. Cheers.